Tonight at 10, a vigil in Normandy, here at the Bayeux War Cemetery to remember the fallen on the eve of the 80th anniversary of D-Day. More than 4,000 gravestones are lit up one by one, a tribute to those who never returned. In Portsmouth, the King tells the last surviving D-Day veterans, "We are eternally in your debt." More than 40 British veterans have travelled here to Normandy. I've been speaking to one of them.
All these memories of D-Day and all the men in the water, swimming, sinking, scrambling ashore in the sands.
And the other main stories on tonight's programme. Wales's First Minister Vaughan Gething gets emotional and loses a confidence motion after barely 2 months in the job. Scientists say May was the hottest on record globally, as the UN chief warns the world is playing Russian roulette with the climate. And how President Putin's war economy is funded by the countries buying Russia's oil.
And later on the programme, a day after the major cyber attack affecting 8 London hospitals, health officials say the extent of the hack is still not known.
Good evening from Normandy on the eve of the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. I'm at the Bayeux War Cemetery, where more than 4,000 Commonwealth servicemen who lost their lives in the Normandy campaign are buried. The 6th of June, 1944, was the day that British, American, Canadian and French troops landed on Sword, Juno, Gold, Omaha and Utah beaches just miles away from here, taking the Germans by surprise in what was the largest ever amphibious invasion. It changed the course of World War II. Throughout the day, commemorative events have been taking place both here in France and in the UK. More than 40 British veterans have travelled to Normandy. The youngest I've met here is 96 years old, just 16 when he joined the Merchant Navy. It comes ahead of the main event tomorrow at the British Normandy Memorial at Vermont-sur-Mer. Dan Johnson's report begins in Portsmouth, where earlier today the King, the Queen and Prince William all paid tribute to some of the last remaining D-Day veterans.
Yes, this was a day of polished national pride and shining service medals, but it was a chance to speak of one of history's turning points with those who fought to secure it.
We fired the first shot for D-Day.
The very first?
On the battleship, yes, very first shot.
We all did our bit. If we didn't fit in our slot, things wouldn't have worked out, would they?
This was a live lesson in the audacious invasion of Normandy's beaches, its detailed planning and its bravery.
This mission for freedom was breathtaking in scale and overwhelming in complexity. Quite simply, the future of the world was at stake.
On the first day, 150,000 British, American, Canadian and French troops stormed the beaches to begin the liberation of France and ultimately the defeat of Nazi Germany. So this was a commemoration of sacrifice and a celebration of service. And this was admiration expressed in applause.
I landed on the evening of D-Day, and 3 weeks later I was so badly damaged that they had to amputate both my legs below the knee. I always considered myself one of the lucky ones that survived, because so many of us didn't.
Top brass came from all walks of life in remembrance and respect.
Field Marshal Montgomery Commander-in-Chief of the Allied Ground Forces, wrote in his message to all soldiers on the eve of D-Day, "To us is given the honour of striking a blow for freedom which will live in history, and in the better days that lie ahead, men will speak with pride of our doings."
School children were welcomed to forge links with D-Day's last survivors, a dwindling number who are handing down guardianship of a legacy. Younger generations alongside heroes.
We were with the American fleet on the way to Utah Beach, where there were ships as far as you could see.
We want to thank our great-grandfather and all of the veterans of D-Day and the Normandy landings.
We will never forget. Thank you.
And there was more royal recognition.
Jeffrey, it's lovely to see you.
It's good to see you.
And we'll see you in 5 years' time for the 85th, right?
For these men who now carry celebrity status. And Joe wasn't going to let me delay his VIP lunch. Tell me about today's event, Joe. How's it been?
Today's been absolutely wonderful. Apart from my old knees hurting me, it's been absolutely beautiful. I had a couple of lovely sing-songs.
This was an upbeat embrace of a country clinging to these last few veterans and the glory of their hard-won victory. D-Day started with paratroopers dropping to take out German defences, something recreated today in Normandy. And this evening at Bayeux, a service in remembrance among the war graves of France's largest Second World War Commonwealth cemetery.
Bayeux was close to the landing beaches, and it was the first city to be liberated by the British on the 7th of June. The city's hospitals were soon full of the wounded from the surrounding battlefield. For those who could not be saved, this was their final resting place.
Then, a moment of silent reflection for the thousands killed forcing back the Nazis. And this sacred ground was illuminated in honour of D-Day's dead. Because it is their bravery that changed the course of the war and reshaped the future of our world. Dan Johnson, BBC News.
Thousands of French civilians also lost their lives during the Normandy campaign, the days and months that followed D-Day. Tomorrow, the US President, Joe Biden, will be here alongside many world leaders, including Ukraine's President Zelensky. This 80th anniversary is focusing minds on the need for unity in the face of new conflicts, as our Europe editor, Katya Adler, reports.
Les Américains, the Americans, are back in town. And it's feeling like the 1940s. From all over Europe, the young and a little less young, clad in World War II Allied military uniforms, celebrating and commemorating soldiers who landed here on D-Day to liberate Nazi-occupied France. These men changed the course of history. 99-year-old Donald Cobb's modesty is humbling.
I don't feel like a hero. I mean, we just did what we were told. You know. I'm happy that we were able to help.
80 years on, they are still huge heroes here.
That it is really a lot of emotion for me.
Refais la politesse, mais s'il vous plaît. Brave French men and women played their part in D-Day too. Catherine's father and brother were members of the resistance. This street now named after them.
The Allies needed details on German military positions. My young brother gathered intelligence for them.
Betrayed by a neighbour, Catherine's brother and father were then sent to Nazi concentration camps. They survived, but she missed her father desperately.
The patrie, his country, is more important than his family. I think it's that why.
But you're proud of him?
Yes, yes, a lot. I'm very proud, yes.
Yeah. Amongst the celebrations and solemnity of the D-Day commemorations, there are also painful memories of Nazi occupation here, some collaboration, and so many lives lost. And also a realization that despite decades now of pledging never again, war has come back here to Europe on a scale not seen since World War II, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ahead of tomorrow's formal D-Day ceremonies,
a moment of liberty for us. Un moment de liberté pour nous.
We found this international youth group rehearsing for the world leaders expected here.
As a German, I wanted to send a message of peace.
Not repeat the mistake of the past.
And a plea from Ukraine.
Freedom to all of us.
A heartfelt D-Day message for leaders everywhere. Katya Adler, BBC News, Normandy.
More than 40 British veterans have crossed the Channel to be here. I travelled over by ferry with some of them yesterday. Most are 98, 99 years old. One of them turned 101 today. Their determination to be here as some of the last surviving D-Day veterans is deeply moving. This afternoon, I spoke to 98-year-old Roy Harrison, who served with the Royal Navy. Roy, you've been here, what, a day now. What does it mean to you to be back here now?
Just brings back emotional memories.
Excited. So it's really, really raw still, isn't it? It's really raw.
Well, just all these memories of D-Day and all the men in the water. Swimming, sinking, scrambling ashore in the sands, Juno Beach. And all we could do was watch. And that was my regret anyway. I couldn't help them.
You came here, didn't you, for the first time
Yes.
5 years ago? And you didn't
No.
really talk about D-Day, did you?
I never talked about anything, no.
Why not?
Because I'd just get too emotional and I didn't want to see my family. I never spoke to them about it.
We're here at a service for the fallen, aren't we? What is that like for you to be
Proud
here?
to think I was here. Yes, it's an honour, but I just wish, especially those in Middle East, if they'd think twice, talk peace and not war.
Roy Harrison, thank you. Very lovely to meet you here. Well, Roy Harrison will be one of the British veterans at the British Normandy Memorial in Vers-sur-Mer tomorrow morning. You can watch it all live on BBC One at 8:30 a.m. Back now, though, to Reeta in London.
Sophie, thank you. Wales's First Minister, Vaughan Gething, has vowed to carry on after losing a confidence vote in the Welsh Parliament, the Senedd, just 77 days after he took office. The Welsh Conservatives forced the vote after months of scrutiny about donations to Mr Gething's recent leadership campaign. The vote isn't binding, but it leaves him under significant pressure. Our Wales correspondent Howell Griffith has the latest.
Consolation in a crisis. Vaughan Gething's friends were quick to comfort him after losing the vote on his leadership as First Minister, a job he insists he can still do.
I am going to carry on doing my duty. I am fiercely proud to be the First Minister of Wales and to have the opportunity to serve and lead my country.
He's only been in the post since March after winning the Welsh Labour leadership.
Vaughan Gething.
But the celebrations then didn't stop questions within Labour over a £200,000 donation he'd accepted from a company whose owner had convictions for illegally dumping waste. Mr Gething insists everything was done by the book, but his opponents sensed an opportunity, leading to a no-confidence vote.
It is about judgment, transparency and honesty. Those are the 3 points before us. It is not general electioneering. It is about what the First Minister has undertaken and the calls that he has made.
This isn't tribal party politics. This is about the good name of government and, more importantly, the person at the top of that government that rightly is expected to set the tone for that government.
That person sat below and listened, sometimes in tears, before giving his own defence.
It does hurt deeply when my intentions are questioned. I have never, ever made a decision in more than a decade as a minister for personal or financial gain. Never.
But spot the empty seats. They too tell a story. A minister sacked by Mr Gething and a Labour member who'd criticised him, both missing due to illness, consigning him to defeat. Vaughan Gething says the opposition parties are guilty of electioneering, but it's his own party he needs to size up and work out whether they are really going to stick with him. So where now for Vaughan Gething? Well, right now he's on the road en route to Normandy for tomorrow's D-Day commemoration. Plenty of time then in the back of the ministerial motor to contemplate and communicate with other Labour members, because it's them he needs to come out in his support. There hasn't been a cabinet of chorus members here at the Senedd giving that vocal support for Vaughan Gething. He wasn't their first choice to be First Minister. It's hard right now to see just how long he's got left in the job.
Howell, thank you. The election campaign has seen a bitter row breaking out, with the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer accusing Rishi Sunak of lying after the Prime Minister made misleading claims in last night's TV debate about Labour's tax plans. Mr Sunak had said that Labour's policies would result in a £2,000 tax rise for every working family, a figure which he said had been worked out by impartial civil servants. But a top Treasury official has said that is not the case. In a moment, we'll look at how the Conservatives arrived at that figure. But first, here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
On last night's TV debate, Rishi Sunak said this:
higher taxes, £2,000 worth of higher taxes under the Labour Party.
And again.
By saddling them with £2,000 worth of higher taxes.
And over again.
Independent Treasury officials have costed Labour's policies, and they amount to a £2,000 tax rise for every working family.
Keir Starmer did eventually say it was false.
This £2,000 he keeps saying it's going to cost is absolute garbage.
But that wasn't the end of it. Here was one of the Prime Minister's closest allies on the breakfast sofa this morning.
I've worked in the Treasury and I can tell you that these are brilliant independent civil servants, and they would not be putting anything dodgy in there. These are all policies that have been set up by the Labour Party, and actually, if anything, they are underestimating the cost to families.
And look at what she said next.
They have been signed off by the permanent secretary of the Treasury.
Yes, the most senior civil servant here at the Treasury, except in a letter written to Labour the other day and published by the party today, that very same senior civil servant says, politely, that claim is rubbish. He writes that it includes costs beyond those provided by the civil service and published online by His Majesty's Treasury. Any costings derived from other sources should not be presented as having been produced by the civil service. I have reminded ministers and advisers that this should be the case.
A Prime Minister with his back against the wall, desperately trying to defend 14 years of failure, resorting, and it was a flash of his character, an insight into his character, to lies. I don't say that lightly.
The political aftershocks of last night's debate as the arguments get angrier.
We'll speak to Chris in just a moment, but first, BBC Verify's Nick Eardley has been looking into the figures and is here to explain. Nick.
Thank you very much, Rita. Let's have a look first at how the Conservatives reached their figures. This up here is the claim that there's a £38.5 billion gap in Labour's spending plans. The Conservatives have divided that by the number of working households in the country and come up with their £2,000 figure. No, this is over 4 years, so about £500 a year. The Prime Minister said last night that this was the work of independent Treasury officials, and it is true that the Treasury did most of the sums, but political advisers who work for the Chancellor were were the ones who set the terms of the calculations by making assumptions about Labour's policies. Now, over here, we've got the list the Conservative Party produced and how much it would allegedly cost. But not all of this was created by the Treasury. The ones down here come from other documents. For example, this one on Labour's Green Prosperity Plan was from a Labour policy document. But Labour insists in that policy document says that the funding would come through a windfall tax on energy companies and borrowing, so not personal taxes. Let's have a look at this one, highlighted there, insourcing. That's bringing contracts back into the public sector from the private sector. The claim in the dossier is that Labour's plan would be less efficient and ultimately cost £6 billion. The sums are based on a figure from the think tank, the Institute for Government. But they told us this afternoon, have a look here, to use this research to partially justify this figure is highly misleading. So, the £2,000 claim is misleading. Labour say they won't increase income tax, national insurance or VAT. They will publish their manifesto soon, and at that point we will be able to fully scrutinise their commitments and how they plan to pay for them. Reeta.
Nick, thank you. Chris, an important row this over the £2,000 claim, but what about the wider picture on tax and spend? We don't know much, do we?
We don't, because we haven't got those manifestos, those bundles of promises yet. We'll start getting them next week. And then there's the bigger picture point that whoever wins the election is going to confront almighty trade-offs when it comes to spending and cuts and taxing and borrowing. That's because of the state of the public finances, and also that the promises the Conservative Party and the Labour Party have made box them in quite a bit as well. Now, as far as today's row is concerned, it's a prominent example of what we often see in election campaigns. And Labour, by the way, have made some contentious claims about the Conservative plans too. And all of this reminds me of that row. You'll remember it back during the EU referendum and the Vote Leave bus with that claim about sending £350 million a week to Brussels, which was wrong. Now, it's worth being transparent tonight about the dilemma we've faced in reporting this today, because these dubious and misleading claims, you could decide not to report them at all. Our judgment is it is worth reporting them and then unpicking the basis upon which we've attached a label to them, suggesting that they are misleading, so that people at home can make their own judgment about whether that label is a reasonable one. That's what we've tried to do tonight.
Chris, thank you very much. Chris Mason there. And if you want more on the election, the Newsnight is where you should go. And here's Victoria Derbyshire.
Yes, we are going to be doing some unpicking on Newsnight from the fallout from Mr Sunak's Labour tax attack, prompting Sir Keir Starmer to say the PM had lied. Yep, the election campaign just got dirty. Join us live, Newsnight, BBC Two and iPlayer at 10:30. See you in 3 minutes.
Victoria, thank you. The godfathers of climate chaos, that is the scathing description given to coal, oil and gas corporations by the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. In a speech to a UN climate conference, he said they had distorted the truth and deceived the public for decades. His remarks came as scientists warned the world's climate is warming at the fastest rate ever recorded. Here's our climate editor, Justin Rowlatt.
Temperatures in the Indian capital Delhi hit just shy of 50 degrees Celsius in recent days, the highest ever recorded. Meanwhile, parts of Brazil are still recovering from extensive floods caused by a deluge made twice as likely by climate change, say scientists. It is evidence, said the head of the UN today, that the world is playing Russian roulette with the climate.
Climate change is the mother of all stealth taxes paid by everyday people and vulnerable countries and communities. Meanwhile, the godfathers of climate chaos, the fossil fuel industry, rake in record profits and feast off trillions in taxpayer-funded subsidies.
Let's take a look at average global monthly temperatures over the last 12 months. Each of the lines here is a year and shows how high temperatures were compared to before the Industrial Revolution, when the world started producing lots of greenhouse gases. This line shows the last 12 months. And look, every single month has set a new monthly temperature record, and often by a significant margin. That's the area we've shaded under the line. The main reason? human-caused climate change. And don't expect these records to stand for long. A new report from the UN's weather body says there is an almost 9 in 10 chance there'll be an even hotter year within the next 5 years. The extreme heat in India means water is being rationed in some places. But we should not lose hope. The UN chief said today we have the technology to replace the fossil fuels driving climate change, but he says we must act quickly. Justin Rolat, BBC News.
In India, Narendra Modi is set to retain power and be sworn in for a third term, equalling the record set by the country's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. But for the first time in 10 years, Mr Modi's party has failed to secure an outright majority in Parliament, winning 240 seats instead of their target of nearly 400. He is now dependent on coalition allies to get past the 272 mark needed to form a government. Together, the coalition has 293 seats. Well, the BBC's Yogita Limai is in Delhi for us now. And Yogita, what does this mean for Mr Modi's third term?
Well, this is a really unexpected turn of events we're seeing here in India. The BJP finding itself in a position that it would not have imagined it would be in. All of its allies have agreed to back Narendra Modi for Prime Minister, but because they're going to need them to pass that full majority mark in Parliament, they will have to make concessions on things like parliamentary and cabinet positions. In a broader sense as well, even with the allies in that Parliament building behind me, they do not have the numbers to be able to pass through laws. So they will need to get at least some from the opposition to agree with them. In the past 5 years, what we've seen numerous times is bills being passed without debate, without discussion, without questioning by brute majority. That cannot happen anymore. But the biggest setback of this election results has come to brand Modi. It's a face we see everywhere, whether on welfare programs, on vaccine certificates, on banners on the streets. It's not a presidential contest, it's a parliamentary one, but because his face is everywhere, it has become about him. And it's this cult of personality that has grown around him that is not seen as invincible anymore.
Yogita, thank you very much. Russia has faced repeated rounds of Western sanctions, but its economy has continued to grow thanks to help from China. It means the mood at Russia's equivalent of Davos, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, has been buoyant. Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg went to look around.
It is the world's most sanctioned country. But here's the thing, Russia's economy is growing faster than the economies of Britain, America or Germany. At Russia's Showcase Economic Forum, even the robots are boasting about it. I love the smell of economic success, he says. How's it doing it? Well, Beijing is helping. Trade with China is booming. Russian shops are full of Chinese electronics. On Russian roads, more and more Chinese cars. Not that Russia doesn't have its own. It's revived an old Soviet brand, the Moskvich.
There's just one thing. This Moskvich is Russian in name only. The parts are Chinese. Basically, from tip to toe, this is a Chinese car with a Russian logo. Another sign of how important China's become to the Russian economy.
And China, plus India, are now big buyers of Russian oil. Despite Western sanctions, Russia's oil revenues keep flowing, helping to fund increased military production, which is fueling the economic growth and bankrolling Russia's war in Ukraine.
The oil revenue has been critical in funding the war. Russia got enough foreign exchange to support the domestic economy and at the same time to expand substantially the war economy.
But for how long? Russia may be bullish now about growth rates, but with Western governments looking to remove loopholes and tighten sanctions, soon Russia's economy may not be flying so high. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, St. Petersburg.
Time for the weather. Here's Louise. Louise.
Hi there, Reeta. Well, we've just had one of the wettest and dullest springs on record, so you would take 12 hours of sunshine, wouldn't you? That's what we've seen today across the Isle of Man. It has been a little cooler than it should be, but nothing in comparison to Scotland, where temperatures for some struggled to get into double digits through the day. There were some sharp and thundery downpours as well. That's because Scotland and Northern Ireland close to this area of low pressure and a northwesterly wind feeding in those showers. That's going to be the story for today and into tomorrow as well. So as we continue through Thursday, it'll be a case of sunny spells and scattered showers, but showers really quite frequent in the north. Further south, there'll be few and further between. Into the afternoon, with a little more shelter from that northwesterly wind, we should see highs of 18 degrees. A little bit fresher out to the north and west, but still lengthy spells of sunshine and a few isolated showers. Showers most frequent into Northern Ireland and the bulk of Scotland, and temperatures once again disappointing for this time of year, 10 to 14 degrees at the very best. Now, as we move out of Thursday into Friday, that low pressure is still with us, and this little weather front will enhance the rain for a time across Scotland. So on Friday, we're going to see some wetter weather slowly drifting its way through eastern Scotland down into the borders. It becomes a narrow line of showery rain as it pushes its way south. Showers to the south of that. Blustery, frequent showers continue to the far northwest, and here, once again, it is going to feel disappointingly cool for this stage of the year. So 10 to 14 degrees to the north, 18 perhaps into the south and east. Little change as we go into the weekend. The showers continue to the northwest, best of the brighter weather to the south. Hopefully something a little bit warmer as we move into next week. Reeta.
Thank you very much, Louise. Well, that is all from us. But before the news where you are, let's look back at some of today's memorable images. Goodbye.
D-Day changed the war completely.
Well, I do sense the pride because it finished the war.
I'm pleased that I did what I could.
He wasn't there to give me away when I got married. He wasn't there to be a grandfather to the children. And the loss doesn't go away.
Chatted about who I served with, the Sherwood Rangers, which were a very hard-worked regiment. But I wasn't with them too long before, I lost my legs.
My thoughts today are with those who fell on both sides. Because war is a nonsense, really, but it was necessary.